in case you didn't know, this season, or the third part of season 1 of my podcast, is going to focus on underrepresented populations, persons in cybersecurity and IT.
Okay.
Are you expatriated, or are you still legally an El Salvadorino? And is that the word one uses?
Both. It's called the Salvadorian with the Mandalorian letters on it.
Like
the type
with the silver chrome?
Correct.
All right.
The Salvadorian. No, I recently became a
that
U.S.
should
citizen.
be your online handle, man.
There is a t-shirt.
The Salvadorian.
I recently became a U.S. citizen as of like 4 months ago.
Oh, no shit. Congratulations.
Thanks. So
I couldn't pass that test, by the way.
Probably not.
How many branches? What?
Somebody bought me playing cards, and that's how I learned it.
Like a flashcard deck?
Correct.
Nice.
Exactly like that. So as a U.S. citizen, you can only be from the U.S., but as a Salvadorian, I can have dual citizenship.
Got you. All right, so wait, we haven't said your name.
Okay, my name is Jose Luis Bolaños.
Could you spell that and explain how the Asante Q winds up over the...
No, I think people know already enough Jose's in the U.S.
All right, and so, like I said, trying to figure out how... So here's the setup. I got a pitch this summer from somebody who thought they were going to like bring in... They were going to revolutionize the world of IT and cyber by inspiring K-12 teachers with what struck me as some pretty weak sauce to like get the kids at Sigsbee School and from the inner city fired up about the cyber and then into the workforce and off and running. And I was like, I know a bunch of people in this business, and I don't think that program would resonate with them. So I kind of wanted to explore like how it is you wound up in technology from where you started. So if you could tell us what you do now and what got you interested in technology to begin with.
All right, so I work for an MSP, managed service provider, so we pretend to be a company's help desk. We pretend to be right next door to their building, whatever their offices are, but we have a lot of clients, and we just try to manage them all at the same time.
Got you. But so like you're the IT department for a company too small to have an IT department.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I work with a group of 6 guys now, and we do everything from helping somebody figure out how to use Word to their firewalls, their VPNs, just about everything in between.
So the whole gambit of fine IT services.
Exactly.
How's your boss feel about plugging your work or your MSP?
I don't think he knew I was doing this.
Neither did you until about 5 minutes ago.
Exactly.
Nor did you know I was going to ask you to do the engineering to set the whole thing up.
Not at all, but I loved it. It's like being in church. Yeah, so, and the way I got into technology is I was a young boy in El Salvador. Exactly.
Fade out.
And my neighbor, who was a little older, her boss, she worked at a dentist's place, and her boss just got a new computer, and they didn't know how to use it. And she asked me, well, do you know anything about computers? And I said, sure, how hard can it be? I did not have a computer at that time. And he wanted to install Word, but he didn't know how to get it. And, of course, some friends from high school had copies of Word that we could just...
Totally legal copies of Word.
Exactly. So I helped them purchase their copies of Word and install them on their office computers, and that's how I got started.
Wow. No doubt. So kind of serendipitous. But like, so what was your relationship with technology as a kid before that?
Not a lot, especially because I grew up in a farm. So,
all right.
And we didn't even have tractors because my dad wasn't into that. It was more manual labor, everything.
Why do you need a tractor when you have sons?
There's that, or you just hire somebody with the tractor to do the work for you.
Right.
But I got my first computer when I was in high school because I had to write a thesis to graduate from high school.
Gotcha. We kind of don't do that in this country. But...
No, it's not done here. It's a lot easier.
I think the quality of our educational system speaks for itself.
Well,
in college, anyway.
Correct.
So, like, what was your early ed experience? Did they have computers in schools?
Correct. So, by the time I got in high school, there was a class on computers, and they kind of taught me how to do a couple things. They taught us email, that stuff, and, trying to figure out the @ symbol on a Spanish keyboard was fun.
No doubt. I have tried to wrestle with, like, when I went to Germany last time to see my brother, I tried to wrestle with the keyboard with, like, the thing that's 2 S's, and I was like, how do you type on it?
Yeah.
And luckily, he has an American keyboard for folks who don't know how to...
For folks like you?
Yeah, incompetents like myself.
Yeah, so we did a little bit of work in high school, a little bit of programming, .NET or something like that.
Better than what I got. I got, like, BASIC on a Commodore 64, so...
fun days.
But it's programming.
Yeah.
Right. So going back to the thing that kind of prompted me to do this, if you could envision some type of program that would have got you fired up about computers, technology, IT as a young lad in the fields of El Salvador, what do you think that would have looked like?
For me, it probably would have been something like trying to help others learn computers, even if I didn't know them. But
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Have you seen what I do for a living?
yeah. So I think it would have been something like that, but it's just different in other countries where you don't have all the opportunities where, people over there are trying to find jobs. There's people graduating from university with computer science degree that have to work at McDonald's if they can find a job at McDonald's.
Gotcha.
So it's, when I got to the U.S., even when I was in college, a professor said, hey, we're going to teach some kids from inner city how to use computers and older people. You want to help out? And I was like, yeah, I'll help out with that.
Nice. So, if you could travel back in time and advise young Jose what it was he should do, what do you think? What kind of advice do you think you would give your younger self?
I would have told him to stick with his first instinct, was to go into medicine.
Should have stuck with the become a doctor.
Yeah.
Blow off this computer stuff, kid.
Correct. Should have done that one, but not.
I understand it. If you can get past OChem, you're fine.
Good.
Your MD is in the bag.
It's
at
in
that
the
point.
bag. No, I probably would have been like, I learned a little more, but the opportunities weren't the same. Like right now, I've seen the government is handing students computers.
Our college has checkouts where if you show up on campus without a computer, go to the library. They will check you in out for the semester. And hockey pucks. That's COVID related, but like I'm quite happy with that use of my tax dollars.
So that's nice. I was gonna say my cousin also from El Salvador, but from a different status in society. His dad was a doctor, so
okay.
So he went to one of the better schools in El Salvador. Actually, he was a classmate with the president of El Salvador.
No doubt.
So, yeah.
The Bitcoin dude?
Correct.
All right.
But he ended up going into computer science from a national university, and then he got his master's in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. So definitely he had the opportunities to do all this, and even with him doing all that stuff, it just didn't dawn on me that I could do something with technology or follow in his path.
How much older than you is he?
7 or 8 years.
Gotcha. And what does he do now?
I'm not so sure. He used to work for like the European Space Agency, and I think now he's got his own company mapping stuff around the world using satellite technology, something like that.
GIS kind of thing.
Probably. I kind of don't stay in contact with them because I feel ashamed of how my life turned out.
Ouch. Well, if you're listening to this, Jose's cousin, reach out, connect. He's doing good work. So, if you had a program here in the States to get somebody fired up, what do you think you'd do?
I've seen so many programs right now that I find it difficult that people don't get. Like, if you want to do it, there's an opportunity somewhere. I get the emails from, CISA, the government security, and they got all these programs from K-12 for teachers.
Yep.
So there's just so much around. If you're trying to reach a specific group, I guess it's just, you got to find somebody that knows how to talk to them.
For sure.
Like I tried in Grand Rapids, I tried to do technology for the Hispanic community. And so I went around to the businesses talking to them about how I can help you with your computer if that's what you need, something like that. It didn't pan out because it's a little too expensive for what people are used to. If they want to pay somebody to fix their computers, they're just looking at how to survive also. So it's just different status for people on
right, when you're worried about where your next meal is coming from.
Right.
The old Maslow's pyramid of needs. You're not thinking about, boy, could I really make that algorithm a little bit faster? I bet you I could get that down to like Big O.
Right.
Log 1.
Big O, yeah.
Not a thing you're worried about when you're like, damn, the rent's due.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm dancing around a little bit around your question, but I just don't have a good answer for that.
they're trying to teach me how to do academic inquiry down at Purdue.
Okay.
Because I think like I joke a lot. Like I learned my computer science on the streets, but like there's something to be said for that. Like I started working on this stuff with no high school diploma, no degree,
Right.
when I was a kid, and did it up from there.
So it goes to the same thing. Like some people have a vision for that, and some people can maybe like see the steps on how to do it even by themselves without having academic knowledge for it.
I did have the benefit of books.
Okay.
like there was, and when I got to Tribune, you were not at Tribune. Full disclosure, Jose and I worked together. I hired Jose.
Right.
Maybe one of the best hires I ever made. And you replaced me when I left.
That's right.
But Tribune, in my early days there, back when they still owned the LA Times and weren't
Okay.
a hot dumpster fire, they really prized certification. So, like, I have a list of Microsoft certs because corporate IT wouldn't let you, like, touch the Exchange server if you didn't have the Exchange
didn't have-
certification.
Okay.
So
Yeah, it's not something that you see on the field anymore. Like even with my MSP, they'll help you get a certification and stuff, but it's not necessarily encouraged. If you know how to do the work, that's better than having the certification in many people's eyes.
until you go to get another job.
Correct.
But don't worry, you're not going anywhere. Very happy with where you're at.
Indeed.
All right,
Also, my wife is very happy where I am.
man. No doubt. No doubt. More important, maybe.
Yeah.
More important, maybe. So, all right. Thinking over the intentions with this project, are there any questions that occur to you that I should have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I'm not sure. What was the project again? Just trying
Trying to figure out, like, if there is a way that we can, from our perch at GRCC and the cyber community in general, how we can help, diversify the folks who show up so that you go to a conference like this and it's not a sea of white guys and handsome El Salvadorians, and a lot of East Indian men.
Oh, there's that. I don't know. It's got to be... I'm sorry, I didn't think about it.
Take some time.
Yeah, I'll take some time.
You're the first recording of the day, so we're going to
Okay,
have to see if
great.
any of this audio turned out.
Oh, that's right. So we can just come back at the end of the day and do the whole thing.
And, the magic of editing. We
Yeah.
just make note of which track was Jose.
Yeah. Like I said to you before, I would teach a class at GRCC if I could do it in Spanish.
Like I said before, I would probably be happy to figure out a way to make that happen.
But in that, you might be able to attract some people that feel a little less secure with their English,
Right.
and take that class from somebody who would understand. I mean, when you're speaking Spanish, you're thinking differently.
Right.
Even when I speak my English, I'm thinking in Spanish, and sometimes I use my words in different order.
Right. My brother is starting to do that flip, where he will invert his sentences, which, like, you hear all the time if you're in Germany, where they speak better English than most Americans do.
Right.
But they'll like flip word orders, or they'll gender a noun that doesn't need gendering.
Correct. Yeah.
So like, I know that feel. I have seen it from the other side.
Yeah. So
Do you do math in English or Spanish?
I can only do math in Spanish.
Yeah.
I definitely don't do any, like we play ping pong at work, and somebody's got to keep track of points and all that. And I said I'm not doing that because I got to do it in Spanish. Otherwise. and the processing power that it takes on your brain to do that, or at least my brain, is just I would never be able to finish a ping pong match.
Got you. All right, man. I appreciate you coming out. I appreciate you helping me engineer the pod. I appreciate you as a person.
Thanks.
I don't know if I told you that before.
I appreciate you because I don't know. I get happy when I see you, and I get happy when I see the things that you've accomplished, and I go, why can't I do something like that? And then I go like, I'll just go back to the house.
I haven't got this time. All right, you want to introduce yourself to the nice people on the pod and tell us how to spell your name right?
How to spell my name right. All right. So my name is Elizabeth Whiting, and I spell my name with a Z, and my last name follows grammatical rules, so drop the E at ing.
Very nice. I don't follow grammatical rules, and if it wasn't for the invention of Dragon Naturally Speaking, I'd have never made it through grad school.
So you're through grad school now?
Ish.
I
do hold a master's degree from Boston University in computer information systems with a specialty in security, and I am somewhere on the journey of finishing my PhD at Purdue with the inestimable Gene Spafford as my mentor. I have enjoyed my time there greatly. And actually, I started doing the SANS master's degree while I was waiting to get into Purdue. So just because I like to teach SANS classes, and I knocked out a bunch of those. So.
Just for fun.
So I don't think you make a good academic if you don't enjoy this shit. You know, like if you don't. My significant other is often shocked by the amount of time I quite happily spend doing cyber stuff and teaching people, and like I'll volunteer to teach outside of my regular class responsibilities with like ISC squared or with SANS, because like I find that time very much like play. So
I can see that,
yeah.
like getting out there and talking to people, and
like I like watching people, like especially like intro classes or like SANS 401, where it's like their first real exposure to cyber. I love that, like, oh shit, this can happen to me. Look, like that's super fun.
I don't love that, like it professionally, like when you're like, oh no.
Well, so like,
oh no.
like the nice thing about where I sit is that I'm sort of a cybersecurity dilettante. Like I don't really have to. Boy, your security posture's horrible. That must suck for you. Because like I don't get fired at the end of the day if the network is compromised or if the ransomware attack succeeds. So
right.
So I just have to say, ooh, I'm gonna write a paper about that, guys. I'm really sorry that happened to you.
Let's talk about the risk register next.
Ooh, hot. So. We know your name. The impetus for this podcast this season, which I guess we never decided how many episodes in a season, so this is just the end of season 1 apparently.
Okay.
I heard a pitch for a program for getting underrepresented folks into IT, into cyber, and I thought it sounded like weak sauce. So I thought I would ask the people that I know, like, what did your path look like, and then what would if you were queen for a day, how would you design the world? So let that percolate for a second and tell me, like, what your career pathway looked like being a slightly underrepresented person in tech.
Okay, so
You said something about a vomiting.
Oh yeah,
90?
yeah. That's later in the story.
Okay.
So I actually joined the Army out of high school.
Man, second in a row.
And when I joined the Army, I took the ASVAB, and they're like, well, you have a computer aptitude. And I'm like, really? Because I was going to be an English major and go teach English.
Let me compliment you on your choices not to do that.
I know.
My brother does that, and to get a job, and he just finished his PhD, but he had to move to Germany to find a job teaching English.
So after the Army, I got out and I worked for what's called TI WorldCom as a switch technician, engineer, provisioner. Voice kind of stuff, with like turning up circuits and doing that kind of thing. And then the .com bubble burst, and I didn't have a job anymore.
Wow.
So I was like, well, that broke my heart, and I'm not going to do technology.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like, screw this .com bubble.
Yeah, and there weren't like a lot of jobs at that time, and I was in a really kind of strange place where I was really entry level. I didn't have a lot of qualifications, and like I had done work, I understood it, but on the flip side, there were a lot of people in the job market that had the same skills with more experience, more certifications, etc., that just needed to work because they had mortgages and stuff. So I just really struggled to get back into technology at that point. And then I took some classes. I worked in manufacturing. I worked all kinds of weird jobs. And then I started waiting tables. And I worked at a restaurant locally, serving and bartending. And it was like a dark restaurant, like on the inside, like mood lighting or whatever. And
I'm thinking of that place over off of Ann Street that's got like no windows, and
it had windows, but they were real little. But like the mood lighting on the inside of this restaurant was real dark. The menu was kind of heavy food, and it's July. It's a beautiful July weekend.
You want to be
morning.
outside.
It's Sunday, and I have to work at this restaurant, and I'm like, nobody's coming. Nobody's going to eat here. I'm not going to make any money. I'm just going to go do like the beginning of my shift, and then I'm going to tell them I'm ready to go and be done with this day and go hang out at home or go to the beach or something else. And at this point, I'm in my 30s. Like, I'm not young anymore, right? I'm in my 30s.
I can't imagine you being not young anymore.
I know. Thank you. But so I go to work and I do my job, open the restaurant, and the manager, I say to the manager, I'm ready to be cut. Like, send me home. I'm done. And he's like, take one more table. I'm like, nobody's coming here. You have 7 people on. Why am I here? Nobody's coming. And he's like, just one more table. So I get one more table, and it's this older lady and her mother, who's even older. She has to be 95. And they ordered 2 waters and an entree to split. And I'm
nice.
like,
Yeah,
oh, well,
29-cent tip on that bad boy.
oh, yeah, totally. And I'm like, this is what I stayed for. And so the manager sends the busboy home, and this table, they eat, they're done. You know, there's nothing left on the table, but they're not leaving. And because there's no busboy, I
get to bust
can't
the
leave.
table.
And they're just not leaving. They're sitting and sitting and sitting. And I'm just like, can I get you anything else? Like, what's going on? And the lady says, well, my mother's not feeling well. And I'm like, oh, no. And then the older lady vomits on the table.
Yuck.
And there's no busboy. I have to clean this. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like, why am I here? I don't like vomit is not my thing. You know, this is not what I
Could have
signed
gone
up
into
for.
healthcare if that's what you were into.
Right. So I cleaned it up, and like in that moment, I'm like, I am too smart for this. What am I doing? I need to go back to college. So
Good on you.
I will plug for GRCC. I signed up for classes.
I think you were finishing up right as I was starting.
No,
No?
you were definitely there.
Was I?
I just didn't choose any of your classes that you were
Yeah,
teaching.
that's probably a wise move.
Yeah, so I chose Katie Vandermeer every time.
Yeah?
And,
yeah, plug
and
for...
there was
she's Katie McAllister at this point. But
oh well, when I was there, it was,
Yep.
that was her name. And
Plug for Professor McAllister.
but when I always chose her because like she was a woman teaching technology, and that made it seem friendlier because usually taking a class, I was going to be the only girl in the room.
Right?
I was probably going to be the oldest person in the room because I was in my middle 30s.
Oh, man, I'm taking classes in my middle 40s, so I know that feel.
Yeah, exactly. And then some of my classmates were like ninja levels of good at this stuff. They weren't learning; they were just getting credit at this point.
Right?
And so I signed up for classes, and within like the first couple of months of me going to GRCC, I got a level 1 support job. So very entry level. I'm answering phone calls, and hi, this is Elizabeth. How can I help you? And then, you know, I really enjoyed that, like figuring out the problem solving part of it. You know, I really enjoyed like, I can't do my job, please help me. And then kind of figuring out like how to get people back to working. And to be really honest, when I went back to college, I thought I was going to grow up and write code, be a programmer, like web pages or something. I didn't know.
Right?
Who knows what they're doing?
Well, like I know bunches of people who like go after that web development degree and wind up in security or. You know.
Yeah. And then while I was in support, someone's like, I heard that you were really good at support. And I'm like, I enjoy it. I'm having fun. And they're like, we have this job and we want you to apply for it. And it was a server support position. And I'm like, well, that's not really what I want to do. And I have like 3 years of college left, and I'm not really qualified, and I don't know. And I think a lot of women, when thinking about their career path, they're like applying for a job, they look at the requirements of the job and they have to tick every box that's on the requirements before they'll apply. And certainly I think that way sometimes, but you know, through my career, I've learned if an opportunity is there, you're not going to get it if you don't let them know you're interested.
Right.
So, and I wasn't even super interested because in my support job, I could do my homework at work. It was really,
right.
It was really great. And
You were this close to saying easy.
well, kind of. I mean, once you do that job for a while, 80% of the calls are going to be the same thing.
Right.
Like a lot of people have similar challenges with technology.
Right.
And then
Have you stopped and started the print spooler yet?
Yeah, exactly. Did you turn it off and turn it on again? Try that. But so 80% of the job is the same, and so it's not really figuring out new stuff. It's kind of starting to get easy and boring, and so I applied for this job, and I knew all the other people that applied for it too.
Ooh.
And they all had degrees. They all had worked doing that kind of work already.
That's the fun thing about hiring in a department. You make one superstar and you piss off the other 7 people who didn't get the job.
So I'm like, they're not going to hire me, and I'm going to go to this interview, and it's just like a practice experiment for me, and no big deal. And so I did the interview, and what I didn't know is they did the technical interview before the person interview, if that makes sense.
First technical and then fit and fill or that sort of thing.
Exactly. And I was completely unprepared. I didn't know that's what was going to happen.
Oh.
And
they're like, here's a server you've never worked with before. Good luck.
No, they asked me questions about technology, and I couldn't really answer them.
What did you say when you didn't have the answer?
I was like, I don't know. I've never worked with that.
Best 3 little words you can say in life.
Yeah, yeah.
That is totally okay.
Yeah.
I bet that impressed the hell out of me.
And in the end, they did offer me the job, and I accepted it. And I knew that that was going to make my school journey longer, and it did.
Sure.
But I also knew that it was going to put me out there. Like, I was going to get an opportunity to work with something I hadn't worked with. It was going to be challenging, and it totally was. And I really, really enjoyed that I got that opportunity. But that position was kind of security adjacent. It was within infrastructure. So I'm not writing code, maybe a little bit of scripting, a little bit of SQL querying, but nothing.
Right. Not like grinding out API connections and functions for a living.
Exactly.
Which is a thing I love you programmers out there. I thank you for doing your work, but dear Lord, I could not do that 9 to 5.
Yeah, it's a special breed.
Like, I feel like I like to cook, but if I was a cook full-time, I would come home and get McDonald's. In the same way, I like to code.
Hot dogs. Everybody I know that's a chef, they're like,
right.
I can just have a hot dog. It's fine.
Right, and I feel like that would be the same thing with me and coding. Like, I love to code if it's fun and it's a project I'm interested in, but...
Yeah, so then I took that job, and I really enjoyed it. I had lots of fun opportunities that were kind of security adjacent. And then one of my friends in security, they're like, we're going to have a position.
Is this a redheaded mutual friend of ours, or is this a different friend?
No, different friend. I have other friends besides that
I don't.
Dude.
It's just me and Chris.
Yeah. So
friend of the pod, Chris Russo.
Yeah. And so then they were like, we have a position coming up. We'd like you to apply. And again, once it came up, I was kind of on the fence about applying because I was like, I don't really have any of the qualifications they're looking for. And they did the interview. And so the CISO and 2 directors of security did this interview with me.
Is that that cool guy with the suit coat I saw earlier yesterday?
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
That guy. Yeah. He's super fun, but he's also like crazy smart. You know, you don't get to.
I sit on a board or 2 with him.
Yeah. But it was a tough interview, and I'm like, well, we'll see what happens. And again, I knew other people that applied, and I thought that they were definitely more qualified than me. And then they didn't offer me the job I was interviewing for.
Oh. They offered you a different one?
They offered me a different one. They're like, we don't think that you're a good fit for what you interviewed for. And I'm like, duh. I read that job description. And they're like, but we really have a need within our area to have someone with your skill set and, you know, someone with your abilities. So we want you to try this out. And so I went into security, and the funnier thing was that security is very like certification. Like, what certifications do you have?
Sure.
And when you read
CISSP, CEH, OSCP.
Yeah. So
shall I go on? No.
Well, what's funny about that is I pick my certifications based on the acronym that goes with it.
You want the best sounding letters after your name?
No. I want it to sound like Mississippi, like when you're in the 2nd grade. SSCP. CCSP, CISSP.
So there you went?
So there I am.
To ISC Squared School?
Yep.
Gotcha.
But then...
Training available through GRCC Workforce Training if you would like the official ISC Squared curriculum delivered in your business. Okay, end of plug.
Are you ever not plugging for GRCC?
I feel like I'm a walking advertisement.
But
as an alum and a faculty member.
Yeah, and I finally got my diploma from GRCC. Excellent. I have a Associates of Arts from GRCC because I took all my credits and transferred to a 4-year school. And
which 4-year school did you want, if you don't mind telling?
I got my degree in 2017.
Okay.
And so I was late to that game, but I had been in technology for a while.
Right.
And, you know, just kind of working through the process, taking classes. And it was overall a really good experience for me. But, like, And I was also really lucky. And I think that maybe people don't talk about this part of having a career path and like getting somewhere within the technology field is that nobody does this alone. Like, nobody can be a superstar by themselves. You don't hatch and then you know all this stuff and like you're just gonna go forth and like wear the cape and save the day or whatever. Like, that's not how it works. Like, people help you, and maybe
it's a team sport, if to use a sports ball metaphor.
Oh yeah, totally. And like, I had really good mentorship through my career, which I was slow. I didn't understand what these people were trying to do for me.
All right.
But I did have really good mentorship, and that's really.
How did you find those relationships?
So one of the people that was my mentor was an architect, and infrastructure architect. She had been a developer before.
Right. So folks, not houses, but systems.
Yeah. So like an IT architect, and
which is pretty high up the IT ladder.
Right.
Right. You get architect, director, those kind of positions.
Yeah. Solutions architect, and like titles. I don't know. They're not super important. They're not. People...
For sure, but that's what it sort of indicates usually.
Yeah,
it's like you're responsible for figuring out how to build the whole thing.
Exactly. You're going to design the system, make sure it's going to work and meet the requirements or whatever. But
and maybe be stuck with it for the rest of your career at that job.
Exactly. But so she was kind of bringing me up. She was raising me within IT and kind of teaching me to think about how to do things and teaching me how to solve problems. And that was. And then I also had a network engineer that was mentoring me, and that was kind of hilarious because I would go to him with a problem and he'd be like, "Do you have any information so that I could actually help you?" And I'd be like, "No." He's like, "Go find information and then come back." So like, he didn't like just do things for me. He taught me how to do things for myself. And then, he advocated for me to get more training and advocated for me to take on more responsibilities, and also kind of just let me have more experience in that area as well, which was maybe a little bit outside of what my job was, but it gave me room to grow.
Gotcha.
And, I had a really fun opportunity this summer. I mentored an intern, also a female,
right.
And it was really interesting to me from the other side that I could tell her, like, look, don't think you're by yourself here, because you're not. Like, you have a whole team of people. You can ask them questions. You can set up meetings. Everybody's here to help you be successful. And that's how this works. Like, nobody got here by themselves, and nobody does this work by themselves. And, if you have questions, if you're not the expert, that's okay. Nobody expects you to, like, come here and do that, and ask questions, challenge what people tell you.
So I think you answered two of the like standard questions I'm using to frame this discussion, which are your early education and how it interacted with computers and how you got started. And it sounded like you weren't involved. Like, you weren't into computers until after the Army told you, hey, the ASVAB says you're going to be pretty good with computers.
Right. Well, when I was a little kid, like, they had, like, one computer in my whole school.
Right.
And, like, you had to, like, sign up to get time on it. And it was, like, in a closet.
All right, I think we are dating ourselves. My friend Thurston just left, and he went to Immaculate Heart with me, and we got a whole classroom full of Commodore 64s. So that was a big day. And so, like, if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, maybe before the ASVAB, what do you think the advice you would give yourself would be?
I don't know that. I don't know that I could take a different path and end up here. You know what I mean?
I have that feeling every day. Like, nobody thought little Andy was going to grow up to be anything, never mind a college professor. Anything technical.
Yeah, but, like, all of your experiences kind of feed into your next thing,
Right.
Like, it makes you your whole self, and, like, bringing my serving and bartending experience into technology seems like a weird fit, right?
Well, I don't know. Have you been to one of these after parties? Like, knowing what a drink does to a person comes in handy.
There's that, but on the other side of that, like, being able to talk to people and understand and communicate effectively. Like that's really helpful to me on my day to day. My military experience really helped me with like thinking about having discipline, doing what you say you're going to do, like following through and having a routine. And like with COVID, one of the things that was really challenging for some of my colleagues was like, we're going to like go work from home. What does that look like?
Right.
How do we do this? And, like,
is it okay for me to take the dog out at 11?
Right. And like, I'm like, look, get up in the morning, put pants on, go to work.
They don't have to be hard pants anymore, though. Now, I'm wearing nothing but Prana like pajama pants.
I'm doing running shorts like full time,
24/7.
Yeah,
New Balance
all the time. But the point that I'm making is like having the ability to like talk to people about things and like understand what they're saying and have that two-way communication.
I forget the name of the guy who writes that book about always getting up and making your bed.
That's magical.
Like on the days where I'm working from home, and this is going to sound douchey, but like on the days when our housekeeper, aka my mother-in-law who lives with us, doesn't make the bed before I do, like I feel good if that's part of my morning routine, just because like I never served, but I did JROTC in high school, so like they beat sort of that discipline and taught me how to shoot. Basement of Ottawa Hills High School. So I kind of know some of that feel. Yeah, which like now what we know about lead, I'm pretty sure that we all shot off like 100 rounds in this dingy basement and then licked our hands clean, which is probably where the lead poisoning came from.
Yeah.
So
not that leaded gas had anything to do with that.
Right, no doubt. No wonder everybody was like Mad Max back in the 80s. So what do you like and dislike about the industry that you find yourself in now?
All right. So what I like about the industry, I really like solving problems. Like bring me a problem to chew on. Let me think about a solution, or even like sometimes somebody will mention something in passing about a problem that they're experiencing. And I'm like, I know I'm not like that smart, but like somebody must have solved this already.
Mm-hmm.
Let me figure this out. Like, it's not that I have to figure it out, but I know that there's
I know how to find the solution.
Yeah,
to
I
this
can
problem.
find a way to fix this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not always...
That was actually my history with relationships in my mid-20s. I know I can fix you.
Ooh, so you weren't looking for a relationship, you were looking for a project.
You are not the first person to tell me that.
But, yeah, so I love that, and every day is different. Like, it's a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. Like, if you're going to be, like, helping out with incident response, or if you're going to be working on designing a system or reviewing a design that someone else made to make sure that it meets security requirements for your organization. There's a lot of different aspects to the job, and a lot of times you don't have any idea what's going to happen throughout the day. So that's really fun for me. So my organization they embrace diversity and inclusion, so that's pretty awesome.
And the short list of companies I'd go to work for if I ever had to get out of this academic game.
I don't think that's going to be a thing for you. I think you got a good thing going.
You think
there.
I found my home?
Yeah. They're not going to get rid of you.
Did you guys get the 3-month vacation in the middle of when it gets warm?
No.
Oh,
no.
Well, maybe I could negotiate that.
But I did. I mean, not for 3 months, but I did.
Right.
But like we don't see a lot of women in this kind of job, and when we do see women, a lot of times they're not in an engineering or architect kind of,
something cyber or tech adjacent, like the training role.
Yep.
Or
project management.
Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, I hate project management. I need someone to do that for me.
Right. There needs to be a scrum master involved.
Yes. I need somebody. Like, if you know anybody that's a good project manager, let me know.
I know an amazing project manager. I will give you his information. Me and Thurston are supposed to have drinks with him later. Steal him from his current job. He needs to be a scrum manager somewhere. He was a project manager for a long time. We'll take this offline.
All right, that's fine. But, like, that's kind of a thing that's kind of weird for me is that within my organization for a while, I was the only girl in cybersecurity. And, I was in a meeting with a VP, and she's like, yeah, you're like security's shining star of diversity. Like, you're it. And I'm like,
welcome to diversifying the workforce. We have improved the percentage of employees by 100%.
Correct.
In the last year.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, you're putting a lot on me, like, pressure.
Don't fuck this up.
But like,
I think I just earned the podcast the E.
Yeah.
And Noah, you can edit that out.
I've tried to be so good, and you're just messing it up.
Foul mouth heathen is what I am.
Yeah, totally.
And
so
they haven't even opened the bar yet.
I know. What the heck?
11:30 seems brutal.
Yeah. What they're serving isn't really my jam, so. But, outside of that, I think a lot of people don't know. Like, a lot of more diverse candidates don't know what's out there. Security is kind of a walled garden where, you have to get over the wall to get in it.
You have to deal with a bunch of boorish jerks before you can get to where you need to go. Okay, let me put words in your mouth and tell me if this doesn't strike you as true. Do you think having to deal with drunks as a bartender has helped you in the security field?
Yes. Yes. People in security drink a lot.
They do. They do.
I mean, it's like kind of their strength.
I think we all can be forgiven for the last year and a half for increasing our alcohol consumption, but
we've been training for this event. Let's be real.
For GERCON specifically?
Yeah. Getting our livers in shape, ready to go. But
I hear that they can grow livers now, and I am counting on that.
You're going to need that in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like that is probably one of the things that I find frustrating is that people just don't know. And then on top of it, for a more diverse candidate, a lot of times they're looking to check all of the boxes on what the HR system has flagged as requirements for the position.
Right.
And then you kind of have to know somebody. Like my relationships were kind of my superpower within my career.
So what I try and encourage students to do in the interest of knowing somebody, and this has gotten harder with COVID, is to get into a cloud security alliance meeting, get into go hang out at the ISC squared. We're trying to decide if we're going to resurrect the ISSA, mingle with the professionals.
So in that spirit, I have signed up for mentoring other people because I really recognize that. What
kind of formal structure did you sign up with to mentor?
It's the Women's Security Alliance.
Yep. Card-carrying member.
So I signed up to mentor with them, but then there's another organization that the name escapes me, but there's other organizations.
West Michigan Cybersecurity Consortium?
Not that one.
Okay.
It's a different one.
I could probably play this game all day.
That's focused on helping people of color kind of get in the wall.
Gotcha.
Join us in the garden, as it were.
This beautiful walled garden of insanity that is the cybers.
Exactly. But, on top of it, people don't realize how much fun this kind of work is.
Oh, dude, for
sure. It's fun, it's stressful, it's challenging. If you want to solve problems, there's lots of opportunity for that. So, yeah.
Dig it. All right, so if there was a question that I should have asked you or that you wanted to answer, any come to mind?
I think you nailed it.
You nailed it. Wait, you're great at this. Have you thought about maybe getting a podcast of your own? Defeasible Reasoning is produced at the Epic Studios of Grand Rapids Community College, Media Technologies Department. Epically executive produced by Noah D. Smith and hosted by me, Drew Rosema.